Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining. We'll start in a couple of minutes. I'm just going to pop a couple of questions into the chat, and it would be great if you could answer them on the comments. I'm just going to pop them in now. I hope you've all had a good day, and if you're in school, I hope it's been a good day for you. So I'm just going to come out of this. So I'm just posting some some questions into the chat. Yeah, and it'd be great if you could answer those questions, obviously, as you're joining. It'd be great just for context to know sort of who's here, what you're hoping to get out of it, and which subjects you're potentially leading, just as a couple of people are starting to arrive. And then we'll get started in about 2 minutes. So if you're just joining us, welcome. If you could have a go at answering those questions in the chat, that would be great. I'm just going to put them on the screen, actually, so people can see. So who are you? Where are you based? What are you leading on? And how are you feeling about it? And whilst people are doing that, I'm just going to do the introduction. So welcome, thank you for joining us. I know this is a slightly different way of doing it, rather than say like a Teams meeting or Zoom. So I'm trying this. I've used it in different types of events before. But yeah, it'd be great to know what people think. So welcome. Thank you for taking the time of your evening to join us for the secondary subject leadership, and specifically primary subject leadership, although there will be some parallels to secondary. I'm Ben Hobbis. I'm going to talk about who I am in a moment, but yeah, it'd be great to see who's joining us and have you introduce yourself. So I'm just going to start with a bit of who I am, and I think it's really easy as teachers to introduce yourself as, you know, hi, I'm Ben, I'm a teacher. Hi, I'm so-and-so, I'm a teacher. Even though that's what I've just asked you to do as part of the introduction. But I think it's good to think about, well, who are we in terms of our values and our key drivers, if you like. So I'm a connector. That's what if you see the 3 circles, there's what's called your primary voice and your secondary voice. If you do a survey and see what voices you are. So I'm a connector, first and foremost. I'm also a nurturer, second, and a creative, third. If you do what you call your MBTI, that's the middle one there, which is the ESFJ. So you can see there why I like organising things like this. That's tends to be my personality habits. And then I've got my values on the side there. So I very much care about ambition, care for others, kindness, diversity, support, and well-being, and just name a few things. So what I do, so I currently work as a full-time primary school teacher and middle leader in a very large primary school at the south of Birmingham. I am the curriculum leader there. So when I did this workshop last year, and I wasn't curriculum leader then, I was a subject leader. But yeah, I'm a curriculum leader where I am actually responsible for subject leader development. So I currently lead a team of over 20 subject leaders. So hopefully you're in safe hands with me tonight. I'm also studying my MPQ in leading teaching as the MPQ LT, and I'm then going on to study my CIPD qualification learning and development. As well as being responsible for curriculum and subject leadership, I'm also the lead for coaching within the school as well. And last but by no means least, I'm the founder of the Step Up Network, which I will talk about and plug at the end of this session. So thank you so much for introducing yourselves as well. But I think it's also important to think about our experience. A lot of you might be ECTs, and this will be your first leadership role within a school. Some of you might be given something that you really don't want to lead, which is quite common, and that's okay. So hopefully this session will help. In terms of what I did, I actually came into teaching a little bit later, and I worked in retail beforehand. So I worked for Morrison. A lot of transferable leadership skills there. I have worked in different academy trusts, different schools, different types of schools. So like I said in the previous slide, I now currently work in a 3-form entry school. I used to work in a 1-form entry school. I've led humanities. I've led on personal development and PSHE. I've been a designated safeguarding lead. in a school. I've led on safeguarding training. I've led on elements of curriculum development. And at the moment, I'm also overseeing PSHE and geography in my current school due to maternity leave as part of that curriculum leader role as well. So in terms of today's workshop, I'm hoping to go through the following: the role of the subject leader. I have broken it down into that intent, implementation, impact, although not everything is about Ofsted, but I know it's often something people like to ask, and I know it's been mentioned in the chat already. So the intent, where to start, the implementation, approaching the role, the impact, so the monitoring that you can do. Ofsted, as it is something that people prefer to talk about, and it is important that we do talk about it. And then finally, next steps and support, and also in that the opportunity there to ask any questions that you would like to ask, of course. So most of you have put into the chat already this, so thank you so much for your contributions. One thing I would like to ask is, how are people feeling about subject leadership? Is it something that you asked for? Is it something that you expected? Is it something that you're really nervous about? Is it that you've been given a subject you don't like? So I know lots of you have introduced me what you're leading, but how are people feeling? And obviously, I know this is being recorded, so do be careful what you say. But it'd be great to see what some people's feelings are towards their certain subject areas that they've been given. And whilst you're doing that, I'm just going to check if anyone else is still waiting to join. Brilliant, Jess. Thank you for your contribution. Yeah, embracing it is a really good way of thinking about it. Any other contributions that people would like to make? I'll give you about 30 seconds, and then any more we can pick up as we go on. There's going to be lots of opportunity to talk in the chat today, is one thing I'll say. So I've put within each section some key talking points that will hopefully help, so it's not just listening to me for an hour. Okay, interesting, Neil. Yeah, interesting. Lovely, Danielle. Yeah, thank you. Brilliant. Fantastic. Thank you so much for your contributions. I love it when that happens rather than that virtual tumbleweed that happens. But yeah, embracing it is a key part, because ultimately, and we'll talk about that in a moment, if you are the lead for that subject in that school, you might hate the subject, but it is something you're going to have to sort of lead other staff on. It's also interesting if you think about our children's views of certain subjects. Computing, which is one that's been mentioned, I know computing is not one of my strengths, even though I can use a computer really well, but actually computer science is not one of my strengths. But yeah, I do have to embrace it as much as I can. So what we're going to do then is go on to the first section, but I want to make a bit of a disclaimer. This is very much a whistle-stop tour of subject leadership. And one of the things I did, and thank you to those of you who did fill it out beforehand, is I did survey as many people who signed up for this as possible to find out what were some of the things you wanted to gain out of this session, and also beyond this session, because I do believe in things being longer than just one session. So I do hope to answer some of those. So I'm going to talk at the end about the longer term plans for this, to how we can support you further. Okay, so it is a whistle stop tour. We could spend a whole day, a whole week long course probably on subject leadership, even a whole year. So I always like to start with why, if you've ever read the Simon Sinek book. So why we're here. Ultimately, subject leadership is crucial. Middle leaders are the engine room of a school, and that's what you are as a subject leader. You are a middle leader, despite not maybe feeling like it. And ultimately, you are the people on the ground, in classrooms, teaching your own class, but also leading key things. And Day wrote a blog about this, and he talked about three core roles in the importance of developing a strong climate. And if you do things like the MPQs, the MPQLT that I'm doing, they talk very much about school culture and how middle leaders contribute towards that. And like I said, in my day role, I do a lot of subject leadership training and development. So first talking point that I'd like you to put in the chat: what do you think the role of a subject leader in a primary school involves? Those of you who might have been already doing the role for a bit, it might have a bit of an insight, but a lot of the time it does happen that subject leadership is just done to you. It's given to you. You're expected to do it, but not given any guidance. So what I'd like you to do is we'll take a couple of minutes, pop into the chat all of the things you think are involved in being a subject leader in a primary school. We'll see what we come up with. I've got my list, but I want to see what everyone else comes up with first. Yeah, monitoring the teaching and learning, key part. Yeah, definitely finding out that information, disseminating it to staff, assessing how it's delivered, also the assessment, which is a key, it's a really hard part, especially if you're a subject leader of a foundation subject in primary school. Evaluating the subject, yes, stakeholder voice, special event days, championing the subject, definitely. These are all great contributions, guys. Thank you so much. Enthuse others about subject, making it easy for people to teach. I think that easiness, that servant leadership of trying to remove as many barriers as possible. Lovely. Thank you so much for your contributions, and feel free to put more stuff in the chat as and when. But yeah, this is the list I come up with, okay? And pretty much you've spoken about most of them. The one I want to talk about is that liaison and link with SLT. And I didn't realise until I worked in a big school how hard it is to be a middle leader, because you're managing up as well as managing down. And I suppose in the two schools I've been in, because I worked in a very small school, now working quite a large school, I've actually always, within that middle leadership team, been one of the more senior members of the middle leadership team. So I've had a bit more benefit of working with SLT and seeing that. But yeah, it's very much the leadership and development of that subject. And lots of you have talked about things like finding gaps in subjects or making sure you're up to date with it using research. And that very much links to that. Your curriculum development planning will vary depending on the subject you've got and in your context. So if your school, you often find that history, for example, is a really well-developed subject in primary schools because the national curriculum for history is so well developed and so well defined and refined. If you then switch that to geography, one of the other humanities subjects, that's often much poorer because it's not as well detailed and developed. And obviously changes of government recently might mean that changes. Teaching and learning, the overall quality of education, so what's happening in the classroom, but also what's happening outside of the classroom as well, that enrichment and experience for children, like we mentioned, special event days. Assessment, that's a hard one, depending on your subject, it will depend how it's assessed as well. But ultimately, assessment happens in every subject. Standards monitoring, review and evaluation, so things like learning walks, pupil voice, which I have put as a separate one, staff voice, book looks, all of those things contribute to that. And again, depending on the school you're in, depending on the subject, it will depend on what happens. Again, development planning. So things like what are the issues in your subject and how are you going to plan for them. I'm going to talk about action planning as well. Again, that will differ from school to school. Management of resources. And again, depending on the subject, depends on how many resources you have to manage. So again, if you are, say, the geography lead, you might be responsible for all the atlases in school. If you're the art lead, you will be responsible for an art cupboard. Probably, and if you're a PE lead, you might even have more than one PE cupboard and lots of events to organise as well. That's staff support, training, development. Now, I really should have put that at the beginning of this list because I think that is the key role: is supporting staff, championing staff, and liaising with SLT to ensure that quality of education is really across the school from early years through to year 6. Pupil voice and experience, ultimately, they are the people receiving this curriculum day in, day out. The whole school day revolves around a curriculum. So making sure that you're listening to them as to what they want in terms of to help. And if you get the absolute joy of being in a school that's got an Ofsted window, then you will probably have the joy of leading a deep dive as well. I've been involved in Ofsted inspection where I've led a deep dive, so we'll be talking about that later, and it's not as scary as what you think. But also we have to recognise, and I have briefly talked about this, that whilst those previous things are roles and responsibilities, your subject is very much contextual, and it's contextual because of a number of different things. So your leadership will differ from subject to subject. Now, I've led very similar things in different schools in certain extent, but one of my first roles, as I mentioned, was personal development and PSHE. If you're the lead for PSHE in a school, you will have a lot of statutory guidance that you have to implement, especially around relationships education, health education, sex education, and so on, anti-bullying policies and all of that. Whereas when I was a history lead, I didn't have to do any of that. Okay, so ultimately, the things that impact your subject and its context will be, well, what are the school priorities? Again, if you're a core subject, you probably have that even higher, or something like PE. And also in terms of national priorities, that will be, well, what are the national priorities? So, for example, if you're being a music lead, one of the things the government would like you to do is to publish a music development plan on your website, which only came out recently. If you are a PE lead, the sport premium and reporting on the sport premium. So there's so many different things you have to take into account. If your subject has a statutory assessment, so we're talking about the core subjects here, that has a big influence on your school and your leadership. Ofsted deep dives we talked about. If your school is expecting Ofsted and you are a school that want to deep dive your subject, then hopefully you are being given time and support to prepare for that. The personal development and wider subject contribution. So again, if you're leading a subject like PE, PSHE, where there is a personal development element to it as well, so developing good citizens, also the whole curriculum adds up to make that, but that's something. The resources, and again, we've talked about resources, and also your school context and staffing. If you are leading 3 subjects compared to 1, that will also depend on how you lead your subject and what you require. Also, if you're in a larger school, you might be part of a subject leadership team or a co-lead, and again, that differs as well. So, where to start? I would like you, for the subject that you are leading, and if you're leading more than 1 subject, just pick one of them. I want you to choose 1 word in the terms of your subject. If you were to use just 1 word to describe where your subject is currently at, what word would you use? So, for example, I'm curriculum lead, or in fact, let me take geography. Underdeveloped. There's my one. Okay, so that's my one. And then we'll see what everyone else contributes. So where do you think your subject is currently at? And if you're not sure, feel free to put unsure. That's no problem at all. Okay, so let's see. Lovely. Confusing. Okay. Wide developing. Lovely. Thank you so much for sharing them. I'll keep. Okay. I will answer that question, Jess, later about the PE premium. No problem at all. Just remind me to come back to that question. So I'll do a Q&A at the end. So in terms of where to start, this is where it can be quite confusing because every school has slightly different expectations. So at my current school, our appraisal, one of our appraisal targets is around our subject leadership or middle leadership responsibility. But our performance management, which is like most schools, runs October to October. So I might be curriculum lead in September, then come October, I might be leading something else. So again, it depends on where you need to start. If you're working with a co-lead who's already led that subject for a while, that's different. If you are brand new to the school, that's different. If you've got a subject that's a bit of a mess, that's different. Ultimately, a good place to start is to know where your subject's at. Now, you can get that information from a wide variety of different ways. You can get it from data, if there is data, or other forms of assessment records. Pupil voice, staff voice, parent voice, depending on how that's been that's worked. Speaking to your SLT and speaking to your head teacher. Asking for that clarity. Clarity is so important. Asking why. Why have I been given the subject? Where is it at? What do you want me to do? Previous action plans. So if the previous subject leader or middle leader has written an action plan, and if your school insists on having an action plan, which is sent and shared with your SLT and governors, then seek out what they've been working on. If your subject was, say, mentioned in your most recent Ofsted report, but I would say take that with a pinch of salt because obviously they are only very short reports and they are from, in some cases, a very long time ago. And also look at your school improvement plan or your school development plan as well. Monitoring, so any monitoring either you've done or the previous leader's done. So monitoring, booklets, learning walks, observations, planning tools, and there are many other forms. Obviously, all that stakeholder voice acts as voice as well. Now, one way you can do that is thinking about writing an action plan. And my views on action plans have changed slightly, because with action plans, and my own head teacher said this, it is very easy to write an action plan, and your action plan actually just becomes a list of tasks. Okay, a list of tasks that you need to tick off, and then it becomes a tick box exercise. So you need to think about starting with that why. Why are there certain things on your action plan? So for example, I'm going to show you one I had for history when I was the history lead. One of the things I noticed was that the year 6 history knowledge and understanding wasn't in line with the rest of the school. That was partly because in year 5 they'd had 4 different teachers who turnover of teachers quite high at different points throughout the academic year. So I had to think, well, what could I do to support their current teacher to improve that quality of provision in history? The best way to do it is to think, if in 12 months' time, so in July 2025, I've led that subject, what do I want to look back and think I've achieved? And what do I want other people to say about my subject? What do I want pupils to say about the subject? What do I want staff to say about my subject? What do I want leaders to say about my subject? What do I want to be saying about my subject and shouting from the rooftops about? And because of that, what do I want to achieve by the end of the first term? So you then work backwards. Think about, if you were to hand over this subject in a year's time, what would you like to hand over? Would you like it to just be exactly where it is and feel like you've not done much with it and for it to be stagnant? Or would you like to be really proud and say, I've done this, 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 and this, so actually leading the subject will be a dream? And think about how you're going to communicate your action plan without sending it to everyone. So I'm just going to show you an example on here. So you can see here, this is from my previous school and previous role, and I know it might be quite small on the screen, so I'm happy to share the slides afterwards as well to people that have attended the webinar. But you can see what I did was I linked it to the whole school priorities. And you can see the first part, the top part, is my initial plan at the beginning of the academic year. Okay. My second part is my action plan a term in. So 1 term in, and the red is the term in. Now, I've highlighted this because in certain schools, you won't collect data for foundation subjects, and you really probably shouldn't be putting greater depth for children in foundation subjects and science, because there aren't greater depth statements. It's very much your judgment. So you can take that one with a bit of a pinch of salt. But you can see there what I've done is, and this was the way my school structured action plans, so I did it in that format. My new school do it in a very different way, so I wouldn't structure my action plan like that. But you can see there I've got my whole school priority there, so how my priorities in history there are linking to the whole school priorities. So you can see the whole school priority is very much about raising attainment and writing, retrieval, practice, low stakes quizzing, and then the third one was about assessment, intervention, and inclusion. So I've then linked that to mine. You can see what my key milestones are along the right-hand side, and then the red underneath, you can see there I've added some more actions in. Those actions there were as a result of some monitoring I've done. So I've done a learning walk and I've done a book look. And they were the things I wanted to see, I'd seen that weren't very evident. I'd also worked with our school improvement partner who came into school and worked with me because we were a subject that we knew wanted to be deep dived, history would be deep dived. So you can see there how I've then adapted that plan accordingly. So your plan doesn't have to stay like that for the whole year. You might find after a couple of weeks your plan's not going to work, and that's fine. You adapt it, you move on. Like I said, ask your school if you would like it in certain template or certain format, and then if not, use your own. Okay. So in terms of approaching the role, next thing into the chat, as I said, I would make this very interactive. What are you most worried about in terms of approaching this role? What would you like to try and overcome, but you are worried about at the moment? Just like to see what you do by what people are worried about by popping into the chat. That'd be great. So what's something you are worried about? And this could be not just necessarily about your subject, but leadership in general, especially if you're someone that doesn't see yourself as a leader, but you don't intend on being, you didn't intend on going into leadership as a as a teacher? Yeah, imposter syndrome. Yeah, that's a big one, and believe me, I get that as well. But yeah, thank you for sharing that, Danielle. Any other things people are worried about that people are happy to share? History mixed day clashes, interesting, that one. I've got some suggested reading for that, which might help. So yeah, but thank you, Vicky, for sharing. Just see if there's any more contributions. Give it another minute or so. Okay. Now, there are many natural worries. Time, sorry, Neil, that one came up and I didn't realise. Yeah, time, leadership time isn't much, and there's a huge amount of work to be done. That's true. And also, if you get that leadership time as well, which is a big one. There are many things that can really shape your worries. One thing is you should feel really proud that you've been given that responsibility, especially as I know the majority of people joining us on this training tonight are people very early in their career. So I appreciate that very much. In terms of implementing, something you should think about really intentionally how you're going to communicate your plan. If you've got a plan, think about how you would want to receive that as a member of staff. And I think this links to your point, Monica, that you just made around workload. The good thing about being a middle leader who is class-based full-time is you very much will think like a teacher. Would you be happy being asked to do this task or this thing if you were a teacher, as a full-time teacher as well, or as a majority of the time class-based teacher? Speaking to staff in a sporting way, asking questions rather than assuming. So we talk a lot about, in the network I'm involved with, the Step Up Network, which you can see along the bottom of the screen, people talk, we had a session led by a lady called Vicky Maguire, which is a fantastic session, and she called it curious conversations rather than courageous conversations or fierce conversations. And she said, actually, one of the best ways to speak to staff, if you've noticed a member of staff is not doing what they should be, you can ask the question like, I've noticed your assessment data is not up to date. Could tell me why? Is there something in the way? I've noticed you're not using retrieval practice in your books. Can you tell me why? Rather than saying, why aren't you using retrieval practice in your book? Speak to the children as well, because they can often be the greatest way to get people to change. Because if you can say that our children are saying this, then that's a really good way of putting it. And find out what the problems are and use your action plan to fix them. You're not a superhero. You're not going to fix everything in the world. I know I have to tell myself a lot that sometimes because I do go into this hero mentality. But you're not going to fix everything. So fix what you can within your subject and within a reasonable amount of time. So monitoring. I know we've just had a really quick chat point, but this is the next thing we're going to go on to. So next question into the chat. How do you think you can monitor the impact of your leadership and monitor your subject? So it's sort of a twofold question there. Your subject or area of responsibility and your leadership. So I'd be really interested to see what you think by popping it into the chat. So yeah, so twofold question, how you can monitor your own leadership, how you can monitor your subject. Yeah, lovely. So people and staff feedback, observing lessons, staff questionnaires, people voice, yeah, observations, booklets, not sure about my impact, mixed the above. Yeah, fantastic, great. The leadership part, your leadership is very much quite hard because you often won't have quantitative data, you'll have qualitative data. So you'll have things that you see, but do other people pick up? That's why questionnaires are really good. So questionnaires are a great way of measuring your impact as a leader. So some of the things I've listed, the first thing before you think about what you're going to do is think, why are you doing this monitoring? Are you just doing this monitoring because your SLT have told you to? Are you just doing it because of Ofsted? Are you just doing it because you think that's what you've got to do? So is it that there's a specific goal you have in mind? Then think about how you monitor it. So if I want to look at the expectations of handwriting a presentation as an English leader, if I'm not doing that book look until the end of the spring term, I've missed over a half year's worth of impact. So actually, I need to think, I'm going to do a book look, but I'm going to do it early in the year. What impact will the monitoring have? So I want to see, well, is handwriting presentation good quality, and what can I do to support children who struggle with handwriting or staff who struggle to teach it? When am I going to do it? I've just said, if I'm doing it too late in the year, I've missed that opportunity to make a difference and have an impact. So actually, I'm going to do it, I reckon, week 6 of autumn 1. Okay, so we've been back for 6 weeks. That's when I'm going to do it. Where will this monitoring take you next? Well, I want to see, is handwriting an issue? Do I foresee anything else? And then plan next steps. I might want to set up handwriting interventions in Key Stage 2 for children who still haven't got a pen license, for example. So I think this is a really good framework of talking your way through to see what you want to work on, okay? Now, your monitoring can take many different forms, and one of the forms of national monitoring is the O word, Ofsted. Now, I've experienced Ofsted in one school where I was heavily involved. So that was the school where I was personal development lead and humanities lead. So I was involved from the personal development perspective because you get a whole judgment on personal development. And then history was a subject that we deep dived alongside reading and art. And I was the history lead. And I was also the only non-member of SLT to be involved in the Ofsted process from a leadership perspective. And I actually I would say we were very fortunate. We had a very good Ofsted inspector. Equally, my current school got Ofsteded the week after mine, so I wasn't there when it happened. But what I have done is our 2 Ofsted action points I have led on this year. So one was about subject leadership, one was about curriculum endpoints. Ofsted in itself, it is scary because of the pressure it puts on people. And I do think that it's something that nationally needs to change. The main thing that people will talk about is the deep dives. Okay, now the deep dives have since changed under the new chief inspector. So if you have an ungraded inspection, so that's usually when you're a good or an outstanding school, and that is to judge whether you're still good or outstanding, and you won't get the individual judgments. From September, those types of inspections will not have deep dives. So if I think of my current school, my previous school, if that was the rule then, neither of them would have had deep dives. A deep dive will happen on a graded inspection. Usually it's around 3 to 4 subjects, depending on the size of your school, the number of inspectors. And often you can negotiate certain ones. They always like to look at reading. They then like to negotiate other ones. So they'll probably say to your head teacher, maybe think of one subject that is really well developed, and then a subject that is developing, that you're still proud of, but you need to do more work on. Some of the things that will happen now, not all of this will happen because it ultimately depends how long the deep dive takes. So when I did the history deep dive, it was a whole afternoon. So it was from 1 o'clock till about 20 past 3. And it involved a discussion with me as the subject leader about my subject. We looked at the monitoring already done, the planning already done, the action plan. We then went and visited some lessons. So we looked at teaching and learning. And very much the inspector was saying to me, she wasn't actually giving her opinion on the lesson. She said to me, what would you say about this lesson? As the subject leader watching this lesson, what would you say is the things that are really good, the things that need to develop? And actually, we went and saw 2 really good teachers, one particularly who was very early in a career, and I was able to look at the quality of teaching in there. Not just look at that, we also looked at books in that time, and we then also looked at books of year groups we hadn't gone and saw. The inspector also spoke to pupils, spoke to staff in the lessons, looked at the learning environment and resources. As history lead, we were very much looking at things like timelines and how they've been used and key vocabulary. And then obviously for reading deep dives or English deep dives, phonics deep dives, there will often be listening to children read with familiar adults, observing phonics, observing interventions and so on, and looking at data. So that's one thing I didn't put in there was about data, but they don't necessarily look at internal data. Ultimately, if you can answer the questions, it will go really well. But also, a lot of people are worried that they don't have the answers to all questions. And I think that's where you just be really honest and be like, oh, I'm sorry, I need to go and get that answer for you. So you might have some monitoring that you haven't brought with you, which is fine. Or like, for example, one of the things the inspector asked me when we were sat down meeting before we went and observed these lessons, she said, what are the outcomes of these lessons that you expect? What do you want the children to know by the end of that lesson? And all I had to do was look on the planning. So I said, do you mind if I just look at the planning? I've got my laptop with me, opened the planning and told her, and she was really happy. And that's what we went and saw. So you just need to make sure you speak to your teachers beforehand to check what they are. But even if you haven't, you can just say, well, let's go over to the lessons. We'll see what the learning objective is, and then I'll be able to tell you, because you can't be expected as subject leader to know every learning objective of every class in the whole school, okay, in that moment in time in your head. So main things are, be honest, be prepared. It's not about who's got the biggest lever arch file with the most piece of paper in. It's about what you are able to articulate and that it can then be seen. So if you say, for example, oh yeah, every history lesson involves some retrieval practice, and you go into lessons and it's not happened, why? That's what the inspector will not try and catch you out on, but you will be caught out if that does happen, okay? So that's actually taken me a lot quicker than I thought to go through that. But I think it's been because when I did it before, it was much more of a struggle to get people to contribute. So what I'm going to do now is open the floor for any questions. So we'll just do the Q&A and then we'll go on to the next steps. I should have probably put the Q&A slide first. So any questions, if you pop them into the chat, what I'm actually going to do whilst people are typing, I'm going to answer some of the questions that people already asked on the Google form, for those of you who did. So someone asked about the understanding the expectation of what a subject leader role is. We've gone through that. What I will also say is Twinkle is very good for this. Twinkle have a really good subject leadership section. They're also, which I'm actually speaking at, on Thursday, they are doing a subject leadership webinar. So if you're interested in that, obviously email me and I'll send you the details. Understand how to navigate Officer and Deep Dive. So obviously if you've got any questions about that. How to run a successful sports day, sports week, run PE. PE is an interesting one. I've not led on PE myself. I have organised a sports day though when I was personal development lead, because we didn't have a PE lead at the time. Sports day, very much, if you can keep to timings, ensure there's no clashes, and you walk around stations in a clockwise fashion, you'll be fine. And look at what your school already do on it. PE is an interesting one because there's a lot of extracurricular stuff that come with PE. My current school, we actually have 2 PE leads because of that, because it can be quite a big role for one person. So that also depends the quality of provision of your sports provision within your local area as well. Effective ways to lead the team and how to plan the curriculum. In terms of how to plan the curriculum, so I know we haven't really talked about that. Planning the curriculum really should be led by your SLT or your curriculum lead, if you've got a curriculum lead, and then you should go from there. In terms of if you do have to plan the curriculum, I've got some recommended reads here. So the curriculum books are these middle ones. So the person who asked about the mixed age classes, Vicky, these books here by Emma Turner are a really good one. The middle one, Simplicitus Altius, that's got a specific section about mixed age classes. So I would recommend actually getting that book. This one here, Getting Subject Leaders to Thrive, this is probably more so for someone who's leading subject leaders like myself in my current role, but it's a really good book. It's quite short. And then this one, which has only come out, Sam Strickland, is Leadership a Race. That's a really good one because it talks about, I thought it was about when people race through the leadership ladder in their journey. It's not. It's about managing change effectively and how quick you manage that change. So that's another one I'd recommend. There are so many other books I'd recommend as well. So if you do have any questions, please do ask. There was another question earlier about the sports premium. So the sports premium is a pot of money that's given by the government to encourage more physical activity in schools. There is a bit of a an R in as to whether it's eventually going to go, but you get so much money per pupil per academic year. Your school legally have to publish their sports premium statement of what they've spent it on and the impact of that spending every year. So on your school website, it should be somewhere. So if you are leading PE, that's a question to go and ask. In some cases, it might be that you're not responsible for the sport premium. It might be that a senior leader takes that responsibility. But in other schools, it might be that the PE lead leads on that with support from SLT. So are there any other questions about anything I've gone through to put into the chat? Just give you a minute or so and see if there are any other questions. I know sometimes these questions come into our heads after the event, so you are welcome to email me afterwards. Okay. What I'll do is, as there's no other questions coming up, I'm just going to talk quickly about the next steps. So, what's next? Like I said, I didn't want this to just be a one-off session. So, should leadership time be protected? That's an interesting question. I was actually looking up this earlier because for our subject leaders, as I said, I lead on subject leadership, and we have quite a large amount of leadership time that we give our subject leaders. I'm going to say large amount. We roughly are able to give everyone at least one whole morning every half term. In terms of leadership time, the rules, there's no rules around leadership time, really. You can go to like your union website and look at the teacher pay terms and conditions, just like the rules around, well, can you be held accountable for a subject if you have not got a TLR? Ultimately, that will come down to school choice. One thing you'll need to say, for example, you've got leadership time booked and then it's used to say for a colleague that's called in sick, ask when you're going to get the time and just keep badgering whoever organises your cover. So, yeah. Thanks, Jess. Of course, I can send more reading recommendations, which we'll talk about in a moment, and I will send the slides on. How to encourage and change and ensure it's meaningful. Two key things that really helped in my school. So I'm actually quite a young teacher. I'm 28. I've not been teaching very long. I currently work in a school where I am one of the more inexperienced teachers. And I'm leading curriculum, which was a big thing for me. I was really worried. My staff have been so supportive because at the beginning of every CPD session, every staff meeting I run, two things I do. I start with the why. So why are we there? Why are we doing what we're doing? Why am I talking about this right here, right now? The second thing is using research and evidence to back it up. That's why books are a great way. Just doing a Google search is a really great way. I actually managed to sort out our issue around endpoints post-Ofsted, considering we spent about 6 months stagnating through a Google search. And that's not me bigging myself up or anything like that. Far from it. It helped our school massively. So I would say in terms of encouraging change, do that. Another good thing to do is if you're thinking of announcing some changes, actually seeking out, I use the word allies in there, seek out some people who you know are key players in that school that have maybe worked there a long time, people who you might think might be the more opinionated ones amongst the staff, and take them this idea and see what they think. Say confidentially, what do you think of this? Rather than just going to your SLT, because your SLT's relationship might be a bit different with your staff relationship in terms of change management. So I would say that reading's a really good one in terms of managing change as well. So yeah, and if you do one of the MPQs, you do a whole section on the management of change. The main thing is if you can get staff to buy in, you need staff to buy into your ideas. So yeah, so I would very much say that, and I hope that answers your question, Monica. So a couple of next steps. What I did was I did put a bit of a survey together to ask what people wanted to get out of this session. Thank you to people who did. I'm actually going to pop it back into the chat so that people, if you didn't get a chance to answer it, and I know we've just done the session, but it'd be good to get any other opinions and any other views on sort of things you would like in terms of from me, what I can provide. I am someone, I've not talked about myself much in terms of what else I do beyond my day job, but I'm very much a networker, a small business owner, a trainer, a facilitator, as well as being a full-time teacher. One of the things I do want to plug is the Step Up Network, because the Step Up Network is a network that I founded. I'm just going to stop sharing for a moment so I can share the Step Up Network website with you. But I very much, I'm just seeing if it's coming up or no, apologies. I'm going to reshare my screen. The Step Up Network is a network for new and aspiring leaders in education, and not just leaders, but it's all about for people who wish to make a step up. And that could be, you might be relocating, you might be a primary subject leader, you might be someone who is taking on a new class, you want to become a mentor, you want to become a coach, so on. Now, the Step Up Network was born over a year ago because I was finding it really hard to be a really great leader and a really great teacher and enjoy both and still have a life. So the network is there for people who are leaders in education, current, new, aspiring, former, people who are educators looking to make their step up. We run events, we run free content. One of the things I'd like to plug is our leadership directory, which I'll click on now. The leadership directory gives you a load of different resources. Some of it is being updated. So you'll see like we've got the coming soon here, and this bit here is all being updated at the bottom. But this here, if you look at our leadership book section, there are, I think I have 40 books here recommended for school leaders that you can go and read. Start with Why being one of them there. Okay, and this is this section is being updated. We have also got several events that we run. Our virtual events are free, so we've got 4 webinars next year: one about well-being, one about development, one about journeys, and one about diversity in leadership. So please feel free to sign up for them, and I'll put some links in the chat in a moment. We then also do face-to-face events, which do cost, but we do them at a really cheap rate. And if I'm honest, those of you who've attended live tonight, if you email me with your names and I check you against the list, I'm happy to give a discount code for them as well. So if you go to stepupnetwork.uk, and I'll put that link in the chat, and that is where you'll get so much information. And if you go onto Twitter and use, I'm just going to type the handle in, at stepupnet_ed, that will give you, basically that's the best place to find out what we're doing and what we're up to. But yeah, if there's anything else, I know I'm also looking at doing a more ongoing training program. If that's something you're interested, please comment in the chat or reply via email, as I'd love to share that with you and do a program around that. In terms of the Twinkle webinar, Jess, I'm just going to stop sharing and see if I can find the link for you to sign up. It's this Thursday. It's at 3:45, so it's sort of during school time still. The best thing to do is to actually email me, and I can send you the organizer's details. That's the best way to do it. So if you reply to the email that you've got all the information from, that's the best way to do it. Apart from that, that is me done and over and out. I want to say a huge thank you for coming. I know it's July. I'm tired. I'm sure you all are too. I know it's an evening as well, so it's not always the best time for people. But I just want to say a huge thank you for joining me tonight and being part of this, as it's the second time I've done it, and always makes it great when you're doing something for free, in particular when people turn up. So thank you so much for coming. If you would like recording, I'm actually not going to send it out unless you email me, just because obviously some people haven't shown up, and I want to give you guys who are here the benefit for that. So a couple of things in terms of email me. If you're interested in more ongoing support, please do email and reply to the email. If you'd like recording, please email. If you'd like details about Twinkle, please email. If you'd like a discount code for one of our Step Up face-to-face events, please email and get in touch. And if you can fill out that survey, great. Thank you so much. I'd love as well if you could send like a few words either in the chat or via email about how you found tonight. That'd be great, as it's always great to have feedback. But apart from that, I know there's a lot of things I've given you there to do. Thank you so much for watching. I'm glad it was really useful. Thank you for your thanks. And if you're leaving now, have a lovely rest of your evening. Thank you so much, everyone.